everyone. We've got a small but cozy audience. So today we're going to have a bit of an informal conversation about a digital story that we realized as part of a research project that we carried out at the Center for Applied Human Rights. The project is called Generating Respect Project, but we will, I will tell a little bit about the project later on. I will contextualize a bit the digital story. But before we get into the substance of the event, I just wanted to thank the organizer, the Political Studies Association, for giving us this platform to showcase our work. And in particular, Sarah and Indrajit, who have invited us to showcase the work and providing this platform to have this conversation that we've been wanting to have for a long time, actually. So before I introduce the speakers and we get into the conversation, I'm going to show the video.
Qui était un imam qui a étudié les sciences du Coran dans l'université Al-Qahira, en Égypte, l'université Al-Azhar, pardon, en Égypte. Et je lui ai dit que papa, je veux être une prédicatrice. Il m'a dit, ah bon, comme ça? Je dis oui. Il m'a dit pourquoi? Je dis parce que je veux soulager les maux des gens. Il m'a dit, ah, tu seras un médecin. Je dis non, je ne peux pas être comme Anna, ma grande sœur, elle est le médecin. Mais je vais essayer de soulager les maux des gens par les paroles de Dieu et les paroles de son message. Et c'est parti comme ça. Moi, j'ai l'habitude d'écouter le Saint-Coran durant les trajets que je fais pour aller au travail. Du lundi au vendredi, je travaille au ministère. Je sors très tôt de ma maison pour éviter les embouteillages. Je prépare mon master. Après le département, je pars à l'université pour l'impôt. Et après l'impôt, je reviens à la maison vers 18h. Parfois, quand je rentre vers 18h, j'ai 1 heure avant la prière de Maghreb. La plupart du temps, je me prépare pour aller à la mosquée pour prier la prière de Maghreb et de l'Isha. Et je retourne à la maison vers 20h du soir. J'ai changé des partenaires sociaux et des questions du genre, des femmes. Et puis de l'éducation religieuse, parce que les attributions spécifiques de ce département, c'est de veiller à tout ce qui est l'éducation religieuse, telles que les écoles coraniques, telles que les madrasas, les écoles fanfaras, puis les mosquées et autres là. Tout ce qui est les organisations religieuses. Et nous, en tant que religieux, il faut que nous cherchions à savoir qu'est-ce qui ne va pas dans notre société. Au lieu d'aborder toujours les sujets ordinaires, comment faire la prière, pour que nos mots soient acceptés, comment le faire, comment s'entretenir son entourage, ça, on le connaît. Ça, c'est le sujet de tous les jours. Mais il y a certains sujets, il faut qu'on ait le courage de l'aborder. Une autre question que j'avais abordée, j'ai même rédigé concernant quand ils ont brûlé quelqu'un à Gao, je ne sais pas dans quelle région, parce qu'il a volé quelque chose. Et ils ont su après que ce n'est pas un voleur. Moi, j'ai rédigé toute une note, je l'ai adressée aux imams, et je l'ai adressé aux imams, et je l'ai adressé au président du Conseil national des ulémas, en lui disant que ça, c'est un acte que la religion musulmane n'accepte pas. Ils ont dit que, madame, cette question-là, on ne peut pas l'aborder. Là où on est maintenant, la société est en train de bouillir. J'ai commencé avec la Ligue des prédicatrices. Elle m'a dit, on ne peut pas aborder cette question. J'ai dit, mais pourquoi? Elle me dit, non. Quand on va aborder ce genre de questions, ils vont dire qu'on est en train de soutenir certaines personnes. Et c'est les gens qui sont en train de voler. J'ai dit, on a juste, nous sommes des érudits qu'on dicte seulement, et on est en train de montrer seulement ce que l'islam a dit, ce que la religion a recommandé. Bon, ils n'ont pas accepté et j'étais obligée de rédiger ma démission. Je suis partie déposer ça à l'UNFM. Elle m'a dit non, calme-toi, on va essayer de gérer la situation et de voir pourquoi ils n'ont pas réagi, c'est cela. Parfois, elles cèdent et elles me disent bon, d'accord, on a qu'à faire des recherches et on va voir si on peut en discuter, même de façon qui ne sera pas très affichante. Je dis, mais il faut avoir le courage. Personne ne peut nous faire quelque chose. Nous sommes des prédicatrices et ils sont des prédicateurs et on a qu'à avoir le courage de voir seulement d'aborder certaines questions. On a mené une activité avec l'aménagement et sur la formation des leaders religieux. C'était sur les violences lors des conflits. Les violences lors des conflits basées sur les femmes. Ce jour-là, il n'y avait que 3 femmes. Et on a été invités à la dernière minute, alors qu'il y avait 105 hommes. Une activité organisée par le ministère, 105 hommes plus 3 femmes. Une activité qui concerne les femmes. Moi, avec ma première intervention, j'ai dit que est-ce que vous trouvez ça normal? Les violences basées sur les femmes lors des conflits. Et vous n'invitez pas les leaders religieux. Ils ont dit, bon, madame, on n'a pas très bien compris parce qu'on a dit formation pour les imams. J'ai dit, mais il n'y a pas des imams en islam, mais il y a des prédicatrices ou des prêcheuses. C'est vrai que quand on dit des imams, ils passent le message d'Allah et de son messager à la communauté, n'est-ce pas? Ce sont ces mêmes femmes-là qui équivaut aux imams qui sont les prédicatrices. Bon, toujours, on a ce problème. Il essaie toujours de mettre les femmes à côté. N'importe quelle femme sur la terre, du moment que tu es une croyante, il faut avoir ce courage afin que tu puisses, la première des choses, pour remercier ce créateur-là, c'est les avantages qu'il t'a donnés. Il faut mettre ça en exercice. Le bon Dieu ne peut pas me donner la raison, ne peut pas donner la santé, ne peut pas me donner toutes ces qualités physiques, intellectuelles, et que je garde tout ça dans le tiroir. Voilà, c'est le message que je peux donner. Et d'avoir confiance, tout d'abord en elle, et d'avoir confiance aux promesses d'Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala qu'il nous a données. Et la finalité, ça sera le paradis, Inch'Allah.
well, I mean, it brings back memories of the fieldwork that we did last year. So it's really nice to see this on screen and with somebody. So let me first introduce our speakers. So I'm joined today by, well, first of all, my name is Piergiuseppe Parisi. I am a lecturer at the York Law School and the Center for Applied Human Rights. Well, I'll tell a little bit more about my role in the project later on. But I'm joined today by, first of all, Madame Cissé Zeinab Keita, who is, well, as you've seen, like a Malian female religious leader. She has a degree in literature from Egypt. She's been in teaching for 27 years. She has previously worked for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Mali, and following that, the Ministry of Religious Affairs. She is the secretary of the National Union of Associations of Muslim Women and the administrative secretary of the League of Female Preachers. She is a member of the National Council of Ulema within the High Islamic Council, which is a Malian, basically, organization that regulates Islamic issues in the country. She's a member of the National Council and the National Commission for Human Rights, and she's got like the portfolio for women's issues within the Malian Association for the Union in Progress of Islam. And she's also the president of the Association of Al-Qard El Hassan. So a lot of different things and a very enriching experience. Then there's Nicolás Braguinsky Cascini, who is a documentary filmmaker, video editor, and photographer. His first documentary, called Solidarity Crime, Borders of Democracy, was produced with Juan Pablo Saris Escarcena in 2020. And in 2021, it won the Audience and Jury Awards of the International Film Festival Tulipani di Seta Nera in Rome, in Italy. The movie basically denounces the criminalization of migrants and people who have shown solidarity to migrants. His second film is Beyond Impunity. And as a photographer, he received a mention award from the Thomson Reuters Foundation. And then we're joined also by Emily Max, who will soon join the Generating Respect project. She has been so kind to agree to translate from French into English. She's a researcher in international humanitarian law at the Geneva Academy of International Humanitarian Law and Human Rights. She was the convener, the organizer of the IHL talks, and her research focused in particular on the intersections between international humanitarian law and human rights and the implementation of these legal frameworks. She worked as an independent consultant for NGOs based in the Middle East and Sweden. She was also a legal officer for the Directorate of International Law of the Swiss Department for Foreign Affairs, and a teaching assistant to Marco Sassoli, who is like a master to all humanitarianists, I think, in the world. And she has a LLM from the Geneva Academy and an MA in Middle Eastern Studies from SOAS. So thanks a lot for joining us. I guess what I need to do before I start to ask a few questions. So the idea is that this is going to be like a conversation. I'm going to ask a few questions to my co-panelists. But I will also take the opportunity to basically present a little bit about the project that on which I was working before joining, the university on a more permanent basis. So the Generating Respect project is an ESRC-funded project. It's a multi-year project, multi-country project that seeks to study the role of religious leaders as intermediaries between norms of international humanitarian law and human rights and armed groups, both state armed groups and non-state armed groups. It's a project. Well, I mean, I'm going to quote the main research question of the project, which is how do religious leaders influence the parties' behaviors in armed conflicts, and can their religious interpretation generate greater respect for humanitarian norms? Now, I'm not sure whether you're all familiar with the idea of international humanitarian law. Basically, it's the law that regulates the conduct of hostilities during armed conflict, and the project in some way starts from the assumption that there is an implementation gap there. And so how can we increase implementation? How can we increase compliance with this body of law? And there's a lot of literature that looks at the intersections and the overlapping between religion and the moral values that basically underpin religion, and the moral values that underpin international humanitarian law and human rights. But this project seeks to basically shift the focus from the religion, the intersection between religion and law, to embrace a focus more on the actors that play a role within this complex puzzle, if you wish, no? And so the religious leaders. The project develops basically across 6 country case studies. These countries are Colombia in South America, we've got Mali and Libya in Africa, we've got Syria and Yemen in the Middle East, and finally we've got Myanmar in East Asia. So my role within the Generating Respect was basically to coordinate the research in two of the country case studies, so Mali and Colombia. And as part of my of this exercise, last year between July and August, I was in Mali for a month doing field work, and I was joined by Nicolás, who basically realized conducted basically the filming and production of these digital stories. And we filmed quite a lot of audiovisual material, and we are in the process of basically post-producing it, so editing it, and we'll be releasing other digital stories in the next few, I guess, weeks and months. But today we wanted to reflect a bit on this particular digital story, which basically highlights the challenges, I suppose, of being a female religious leader in Mali, so in a predominantly Muslim country, and how, what is the role of female religious leaders in this country. So I guess because the context is Malian, I don't know how much you guys know about Mali. I think my idea would be to start from a question for Madame Cissé, which is whether she can tell us a little bit about Mali. So I'm going to repeat it in French. Madame Cissé, si pouvez-vous nous parler un peu du Mali, s'il vous plaît?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Tout d'abord, je vous remercie de m'avoir donné l'occasion de participer à cette conférence vidéo. Le Mali, la République du Mali est un État d'Afrique de l'Ouest. Son capital est Bamako. Sa superficie est de 1 241 238 km². Sa population est de 21 473 764 habitants. Le Mali était colonisé par la France. Elle a eu son indépendance le 22 septembre 1960. Il y a plusieurs ethnies au Mali.
Madame Cissé, ça vous va si je traduis la première partie déjà?
Okay.
So hello everyone. Madame Cissé started with an Arabic formula saying greetings to everybody. She also wants to thank the Generating Respect project and the organizers for the opportunity to participate in today's event. So Mali is a state located in the western part of the African continent. Its capital is Bamako. Its superficie is 1 241,238 square kilometers. It has about 21,500,000 inhabitants. It was colonized by France, and then it gained its independence on the 22nd of September. Madame Cissé, l'année d'indépendance du Mali, vous nous avez
1960. 1960.
That's on 22nd of September 1960.
Il y a plusieurs ethnies au Mali. Et la langue parlée, c'est le bambara. Et la langue officielle, c'est le français. Le Mali est un pays laïque où la liberté du culte est consacrée par la loi fondamentale, comme la plupart des pays de la sous-région. Donc, la religion musulmane, ça va dans les 90% des populations. 90% sont des musulmans. 2,5% sont les chrétiens, catholiques et protestants. Et puis, les religions traditionnelles sont au nombre de 9% sont des animistes.
So there are many ethnicities in Mali. The local language is Bambara, but the official language used, I guess, by state administration is French. Mali is, in French, we say laïque country. The state doesn't have any official religion, and freedom of religion is inscribed in the constitution in Mali as well as in other states from the same region. And in terms of diversity, 90% of the population is Muslim, 2.5% of the population is Christian, either Catholics or Protestants, and then 9% of the population follows the traditional religion, which is animism.
Le Mali a une économie principalement rurale. Le pays fait partie de la communauté économique des États de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, qui est le CEDEAO, et de l'Union africaine. Le Mali est la cible d'attaque des bandits depuis 2012 et est confronté à des conflits communautaires.
So in Mali, the principal economic source of revenue is rural economy. The country is part of, I'll try to translate it, but the Economic Union of Western African States, as well as of the African Union. It's been facing conflict and attacks from what Madame Cissé called bandits since 2012, as well as many religious, internal religious conflicts.
C'est tout pour le Mali.
And that's it on Mali's description.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Cissé. Well, I guess to get a bit more into the, I suppose, the substance of the project, I thought that it would, obviously this project focuses on the role of religious leaders, but who are religious leaders for us? No? So within the framework of this project, we adopted a definition of religious leader, which is quite wide, and because we were trying to basically be as comprehensive as possible in relation to who exercises that kind of religious leadership. No? And so basically we include in the definition members of the clergy, religious teachers, lay leaders who perform some form of spiritual or religious function, social service providers, and more generally anyone that basically plays a role, a leadership role, to serve their faith in communities. And we're not just talking about individuals, we're also talking about organizations. No? So I mentioned, I think when I was introducing Madame Cissé, but also I think in the video, the High Conseil of the High Islamic Council of Mali, L'Haut Conseil Islamique du Mali, was mentioned. That's an organization and an umbrella organization of basically Muslim religious leaders in the country that basically regulates, if you wish, the Muslim faith in Mali, yeah, so I guess that my next question for Madame Cissé is it's actually a set of questions, if you wish. So first of all, how would you define a religious leader? What is it, and what is it expected as a role from male and female religious leaders in Mali? And what role do you think that female religious leaders in particular should have? So I'm going to repeat this in French with my bad pronunciation, but hopefully that would be fine. So Madame Cissé, comment définiriez-vous un leader religieux? Quel est le rôle attendu d'un leader religieux homme et d'un leader religieuse au Mali? Et selon vous, quel rôle les leaders religieux devraient-ils avoir au Mali?
Merci beaucoup. Un leader religieux, tout d'abord, doit construire la vision, nourrir la collaboration, promouvoir la performance. Un leader religieux aussi doit cultiver l'apprentissage, s'assurer des résultats. Il doit avoir toujours dans la tête qu'il doit transmettre les messages de Dieu. Il doit avoir la confiance des fidèles. Donc, il doit être exemplaire parce qu'on ne peut pas être on ne peut pas avoir la confiance des fidèles, de tout ce qui nous entoure, sans être exemplaire. Donc, un leader, de façon générale, un leader religieux ou bien une leader religieuse doit respecter ses engagements, faire ce qu'il dit et dire ce qu'il fait. Ça, c'est de façon très brève.
Je vais traduire ça déjà si ça vous va. So, a religious leader, male or female, needs to build vision, feed collaboration, and promote performance. He or she also needs to cultivate learning, enter results, and transmit God's messages. He or she needs to really needs to have and work based on the confidence of his or her worshippers. And in that, he or she really needs to be exemplary and act as an example in order to get the trust of his or her worshippers. And also he or she needs to respect their engagement, say what he or she is going to do, and do what he or she has promised.
Maintenant, qu'est-ce que la société demande des leaders religieux? C'est très simple et de façon très brève. On doit œuvrer à une réconciliation durable et parvenir à des sociétés stabilisées. Parce que les messages qu'on doit diffuser, ça doit nous donner le résultat des sociétés apaisées, stabilisées, qui respectent les droits de toutes les personnes, quelle que soit leur religion, leur race, leur couleur, leur ethnie. Les leaders religieux ont un rôle à jouer pour contribuer à la compréhension et au respect mutuel entre les communautés. Ça, c'est de façon très brève. Mais maintenant, quel est le rôle? Maintenant, traduisez, puis je continue.
Thanks. So to answer the question as to what does society expect from religious leaders, the answer is actually quite easy. Religious leaders need to help find durable reconciliation for a society and the Malian society. And the result of religious leaders' work should be a stabilized and peaceful society, and one that is respectful of everyone, regardless of their religion, political affiliation, or ethnicity. And there should be some mutual comprehension and mutual respect within that society, and the work of religious leaders should help achieve that.
Quel est le rôle des leaders religieux en tant qu'hommes ou bien des leaders religieux en tant que femmes? Ça, c'est de façon générale et particulièrement chez nous ici au Mali. On doit parvenir le message. On doit avoir la capacité de transmettre le message de Dieu aux fidèles qui contient les plus grandes sagesses de la vie, à savoir vivre en communauté avec les autres, veiller à l'apaisement du climat social, promouvoir le pardon, le vivre ensemble, l'entraide et la réconciliation mutuelle. Maintenant, avoir la confiance en soi-même, tout d'abord avoir la confiance en soi-même et le courage de transmettre ces messages d'Allah et de mettre dans la tête, il y aura toujours des difficultés, il y aura toujours des obstacles, mais la récompense de ces difficultés, de ces obstacles, c'est quoi? C'est la récompense et on va avoir, Inch'Allah, une très bonne récompense d'Allah qui est le pardon et le paradis.
Je finissais juste de noter. So the second question, what is the specific role of a religious leader as a male, as a man or a woman? And the answer is the same regardless of the gender. A religious leader should have the ability to transmit or forward God messages, which are the messages with the highest level of wisdom, and the messages are the following: the ability to live together peacefully as the society, the ability for genuine forgiveness, appeasing or appeasement of the social climate and mutual reconciliation. And in order to be able to forward these messages efficiently, a religious leader needs to have a certain level of self-confidence, as well as the courage of preaching Allah's messages. It's not necessarily an easy path. It's one that is sometimes filled with obstacles and difficulties, and a religious leader should be aware of that. However, there is always a reward for facing those obstacles and difficulties, and the reward lies in God's forgiveness and access to paradise.
C'est tout? Oui. Ah, ok, parfait. Merci beaucoup, Madame Cissé. Yeah, no, I mean, there are certain characteristics that certainly were mentioned by Madame Cissé and that we found basically in many of the interviews that we did with other religious leaders, not just of the Muslim confession, but also, for example, of the Christian religion. There's a minority in Mali which also belongs to the Christian religion, and then obviously the animistic religions from Africa, which are also very important in the country. I want to move on a little bit onto the some more technical issues. So how did we approach this topic methodologically? And well, I mean, just a few general information about the project. The project is co-produced with a humanitarian organization in particular called Geneva Call, which is basically a Geneva-based humanitarian organization that works towards the promotion of the international humanitarian law and to ease the suffering of civilians in conflict. In particular, the project was developed by Ioana Chismas, who is a reader at the York Law School, and Ezekiel Heth, who is the senior policy and legal advisor with Geneva Call. As we are trying to do today, but also as we've tried to do throughout the entire project, we've tried to put at the center of the project the voices of religious leaders. We've done that through a methodology that basically relies on data collections with expert interviews and also in-country interviews. I'll tell a little bit more about how we implemented that methodology in Mali specifically later, and also through the use of art essentially as a tool, art-reliant methods as a tool to provide a bit more visibility to these research insights, if you wish. And the idea that the objective of the project is, of course, to on the one hand, generate new theoretical insights about the role of religious leaders in conflict and in relation to humanitarian norms, and that these basically theoretical insights could, in a way, feed into some form of policy reflection around how can we best engage, how can humanitarian organizations best engage religious leaders in conflict. And as I mentioned a moment ago, the audiovisual part of the project is particularly important because we wanted to use this as a tool to, in a way, make the research a bit more accessible, to being able to provide visibility to certain issues that affect the country, and so forth and so on. And so part of this conversation is really about how basically the academic part of the team in some way dialogue and established a dialogue basically with the filmmaker in particular, with Nicolás. No? And I tried to put down a few points of reflection from the researcher viewpoint. So what was my role in in this especially in the field work and in this research. And I've written it down in terms of responsibilities, because I think as a researcher, especially when we're talking about research with human participants, with individuals in the field, as researcher, we have a responsibility towards them and towards the story that they're telling. Yeah. And so, well, obviously, I've kind of summarized those into 3 main points. And I don't know whether this is going to be like comprehensive or not, but obviously the most, I suppose the one that doesn't need much of an explanation is providing finding a key to read basically the context, the socioeconomic and political context of Mali, and understand that background in order to be able to basically establish this dialogue with both the research participants, in this case, Madame Cissé, and the video maker. Then I suppose the second responsibility was basically to translate this theoretical knowledge, this background, into something that is more, I suppose, comprehensible and understandable from the perspective of both the research participants and the video maker. Of course, we as academics, we tend to have a bit of a sometimes obscure or, if you wish, difficult language. And so trying to translate that into more manageable pieces of information that could be used basically to establish this dialogue was obviously key. And then, of course, keep myself in check in some way. So obviously, when we go to the field, we come with a baggage of experience, with a certain viewpoint, with certain lenses, if you wish. And so the idea was to always try to make sure that my views, or better, like to acknowledge that I come with that baggage, and that whenever I'm trying to analyze, to unlock certain dynamics in the field, I am aware of those lenses, and I'm able to basically distinguish how those lenses determine a certain interpretation of the facts on the ground. And so, as a matter of fact, as part of the methodology, we also envision the idea of having these reflective diaries, which basically have this fulfill this function of basically disclose, if you wish, to myself what my bias is, and then being able to disclose it in the project outputs. But what I would like to ask now to the participants, and in particular to Nico, so Nico basically, as I said before, he joined me during the first couple of weeks of the project to film basically some interviews, some of the field work that we did. And so what I would like to ask him is, Nico, how did you interpret your role in the project as a filmmaker, as a digital storyteller?
Thanks, Pierre. Hello to everyone. Well, thanks to everybody that is here. for joining us. Thanks to Emily, thanks to you, Madame Cissé, also to the organizers. I have a small question, like a methodology question related to, should I stop at some point to translate this to French, or I just go? What would you like to do, Pierre?
I don't know, like we didn't provide like the translation from like English into French, but
okay. Sorry, I came across this question now, so sorry for the. Well, anyways, thanks for the question. And as you said, well, I started with the role in the project. I think it's well, I can define the role by what is said in my contract. That is, in particular, says to use methods such as digital storytelling to support data collection, analysis, and impact. Is something that you were just saying now. But I would like to expand this a little bit, because as actually we're having today this conversation through an audiovisual tool, as is Zoom, but also we started with this digital story with Madame Cissé at the beginning. So our idea is to be able to reach academic audiences as well as non-academic audiences. So the idea is to use what we did as researchers in the field. Of course, you were the researcher, I was accompanying you, but I think that we had to find a way or to balance the traditional way to do the research, as well as incorporating a camera. So my role in this case is try to support the researcher actually work. And I think it's important to have a little bit of context, because I started saying that we're using Zoom, but we're used to use now WhatsApp to watch videos on YouTube. So it's a new language that we're involved with every day on a daily basis. And the idea from our perspective, from the project, was to incorporate this not only as a tool for doing the research, but also to share the results of the research. So we made two field trips to Colombia and Mali. In this case, we're talking about Mali, but since they're different contexts, we try to portray the subject of the research directly, straight, with a more objectivity in a way, because our idea was to portray or to allow the protagonists to have their own voices straight to the audience who's watching the videos. Of course, we're doing the editing, we're selecting which part we will be using, but at the same time, what you saw in the video is Madame Cissé speech. But not only that, we also share the video with her before publishing it. So our idea was not like if we were like a news media channel or something like this, that we want to cut and to make the person say whatever we like to have her or him saying. But instead of that, we try to respect what they're saying, because our idea is to share this, as I said, with others. For instance, it could be civil society, it could be NGOs, policymakers, think tankers, and of course, the academic community. So all in all, to summarize this short answer, my role in a way, as you said before, is to find a way to translate perhaps a complex approach to complex settings, because we're talking about, in this particular case, of countries that are involved in armed conflicts. So there's a lot of factors we have to consider when producing this these stories, but at the same time, always the spirit behind our products is to share an honest view of what we produced while the interview was taking place, and also to share with academic and non-academic audiences, like translating, as you were saying before, Pierre, these complex situations to these different audiences. So I hope that at some point I made some, I could answer in a way this, so in a way my role in this project is some kind of translator to broader audiences and into audiovisual language, what the project is producing. Thanks.
No, thanks a lot, Nico. And I mean, this notion of co-production as well, I think it's very important and very interesting to me. I mean, I've been working on another project. This is just a reflection that comes, like laterally in some way. But and as part of this other project I've been working, we've been reflecting a lot on the value of co-production and what does it mean really to co-produce something, and I suppose that part of the challenge, I don't know whether we're going to go back to that later on. I have no idea, but I guess that part of the challenge of this project was making sure that obviously we produced the output, but at the same time that we were, respectful of the material that we gather and the views of the people that basically appeared on camera. I think it's it's a challenge when when we have to both balance, I suppose, these two elements. But speaking of challenges, obviously the most immediate challenge that we were facing when we went to the field was, how are we going to work in this environment? Obviously, it's an environment that we didn't know. No one, like neither me nor Nico, had been in Mali before. We didn't know the country, and so the idea was how do we unlock the dynamics here? And I suppose that's a problem that a lot of different projects that have this heavy field component face at some point. Again, I suppose that what I would like to reflect on is how do we overcome these challenges in some way, and again, I've tried to sort of summarize some of my reflections in 4 points. I guess that, well, obviously the most obvious one is, how do we unlock social conventions that we're not used to, so that's the first, I suppose, objective that we have to overcome once we visit a country, a context where we're not used to. Obviously moving around safely. But here, when I use the word safely, I'm not talking only about physical security. I'm also talking about what does it mean to, I suppose, and I'm quoting here a research participant from the most recent fieldwork as part of this project in Colombia. How do we merge? How do we become part of the landscape? And is there any way that we can sort of pass unnoticed? Well, unnoticed, I suppose, no, in a country where, our skin color obviously comes across very, starkly, but how do we merge in that environment, I suppose, and the third reflection obviously is what is the relationship between the research participants, the context, and the camera in some way, because we may say, yeah, we're just going to go there and sort of follow people doing, their daily stuff, but then in reality, the camera is there, and that is going to alter in some way the dynamics and the way individuals basically behave and interact with each other. And so, how do we overcome that? And obviously, how do we get access to people? How do we gain their trust, or can we really gain their trust? Is there any way that we can gain their trust? So I'm actually going to, turn this question back to Nico and perhaps make it a bit more technical, I suppose. What are, Nico, the technical and conceptual challenges that you faced as a filmmaker, and how do you respond to these question mark, if you wish, that I just sketched?
Thanks, Pierre. Well, yes, I think it's honestly, probably you will find different answers if you work with different filmmakers. My approach in this case, as I try to do when I work in different environments with different people, and sometimes without really having a lot of time ahead to get some confidence between the interviewee and the interviewer. This is one of the key things, and as you were saying. So I would say that, because I would like to say that there's the conceptual part of it, and then the technical aspect. And regarding, I prefer to start it, with the conceptual, because as you were saying, our idea always is try to be as less invasive as possible. Of course, that does not mean that we will not be there. I mean, the camera is there, and for instance, in many cases where we're like 2 or 3 people there, so of course you're noticed if you're in the place. But at the same time, if you gain the confidence and if the trust of the interviewee from there, and if you're not rushing the interview, probably you will have a better option or a better result in terms of the interview. So in terms of the conceptual way of approaching this, as I said, I would like to always think to be as less noticed as possible. Try to talk with the people before going to the field, if possible. If not, try to, before taking out the camera, introducing yourself, talking about, like a general, like a normal conversation, but then little by little, talking about how the interview will be developed, and also what are our intentions. Of course, normally we do this before, but and how is our procedure, because it's like then we start with the technical aspect, which is not only filming but then editing. And this part is also key, because for instance with Madame Cissé we film, I don't remember exactly the amount of hours, but probably something around 4 to 5 hours that we summarize in the 10 minutes video you just saw. So of course, when you do something like this, you're cutting out quite a lot of things that perhaps it should also be in there. But in terms of, as I was saying before, in terms of sharing this with different audiences, you try to follow some rules in terms of producing the video. So I think the technical aspect also goes to how I go with my gear, in terms of I try to be as small as possible with my gear. So I fly with 2 cameras, as less lenses as possible, 1 tripod, small lights, and microphones. So that's like the very technical part of it. But at the same time, when we were filming at Madame Cissé's house, we tried to follow a conversation with her. So there, the conceptual and technical aspect combines. And I feel maybe this is something that we can also ask to Madame Cissé, but I felt there that at some point she forgot that the camera was there, because she naturalized that we were there filming, and because it took quite a lot of time, the conversation, she forgot about it. So yeah, I think it's more or less what I would like to say in terms of the challenges. And perhaps a small comment, because you mentioned it, and of course it's not a detail, that we're talking about countries that, as we were saying, in unarmed conflict situations. So bringing a camera is not an easy tool to bring out in the street, or even for making the interviews. So we have this also, this part, which I really think is super important, that we always try to take care of what we're using, which part of the interviews, but also not to put in danger the person who is willing to share their testimonies, because we go there, we film, and then we leave the place. But the people who are interviewee, they're still in the place. So this is for me, is one of the most important challenges, or more the most stressful situations that we faced, because we really want to bring the testimonies out, but at the same time not to put in danger any of the persons. So it's a complicated balance to find, but I think one of the key aspects of this is to share the story before publishing it with the protagonist. There we know that the person agrees on how we're presenting them. So that's my answer. I hope it makes sense.
It does completely, Nico, and thanks a lot. I'm actually going to ask then maybe Madame Cissé about how she felt about the video. But before, let me just give just for your benefits, basically the whole field work. The way we implemented the methodology was essentially through I suppose like 3 steps. Now, first of all, we went into the country. We had a workshop with a number of religious leaders and humanitarian organizations that participated. Because we held this meeting under the Chatham House rule, I can't disclose really who was there. But let me say that that part of the fieldwork, I suppose, was meant to generate that sort of exchange and that network that we wanted basically to produce as an impact, as a pathway to, as one of the elements of our pathway to producing impact. No, sorry. And then we had basically we conducted 2 types of interviews, I suppose. So research interviews, in-depth research interviews with religious leaders, humanitarian actors, even armed groups, that were, I'd say, quite technical in their scope, because they were trying to basically gauge how, for example, influence is exerted on, say, in armed groups, or what factors determine that a particular religious leader is more influential than another, what are the personal factors, and so forth and so on. And then the audiovisual part, which we've been discussing so far. So like these filming that we did of both places, contexts, and individuals. Individuals also in their daily, I suppose, in their daily activities. No, obviously we couldn't do this with every single participant. We did it with, I think, if I remember correctly, 4 or 5. We've published actually 2 of these longer stories in some way, and then we'll publish a couple more, I think. But the question that I have for both participants, actually, both co-panelists, actually, is what do you think, from your perspective, is the added value of the video? So I'm going to ask this first to Nico, and then I'm going to do the same questions for Madame Cissé.
Well, I think, perhaps for this, I would like to in some way to summarize what we were saying before, because I think the academia now is facing like a new time, in a way, where the audiovisual language is, as I was saying before, is part of our lives. And I think that the video is has to be a new way to, or a new tool to be incorporated while doing research. So the added value, in a way, for me, is to, instead of incorporating, for instance, like the original anthropological studies, where you have the text, but then the images, pictures, or draws of the cultures that are that were researched or investigated. In nowadays, we can incorporate in the same language, in the same support, in video, the speech of the others to whom we're asking the questions, but also the research language. So all the same interaction are in the same is in the same support. in this case, video. So in my opinion, having the ability to present the speech straight, you know, the speech of the interviews, their thoughts, their perspective straight to a new audience, I think is one of the main important or the key aspects of using video. But also, I think that videos nowadays are the right tool to reach non-specialized audiences, but also researchers, because I'm quite sure that people that are already in the conversation there at the university, we use quite a lot the video. So I think that's also an important way to or tool to reach these two audiences, as I was saying. Also, something that we didn't say, if I'm not wrong, is that the videos allows us to create an archive. And this is something that could be revisited in the future by the same project, of course, but also it will be open to other researchers, but also to civil society, because one of the goals of this project is to allow different actors to put some light, in a way, to the role of the religious leaders in these conflict areas. So having the ability to share this archive to others, I think is one of the important aspects of this. Yeah, I think that's one. I would say that these different points are the added values of video from my perspective.
Thank you, Nico. And I mean, I find the point on the visual memory a very interesting one, to be fair. But I wanna ask the same questions to Madame Cissé. Madame Cissé, je vais vous poser la même question que j'ai posée à Nicolas déjà, et que c'est quelle est selon vous les valeurs ajoutées des vidéos sur le projet. Et je vais ajouter une petite question, si vous voulez, que c'est pas dans ce qu'on avait parlé en avant, mais c'est, est-ce que vous pensez que les résultats finaux, ça veut dire l'histoire digitale, les vidéos que Nicolas a produites, réfléchit les contenus de l'interview qu'on a fait quand on était au Mali? Est-ce que vous pensez qu'il y a, parce que clairement, quand Nico a produit ces vidéos, il a dû couper beaucoup de parties du matériel audiovisuel. Donc, la question c'est, est-ce que vous pensez que ça réfléchit, je ne sais pas si je le dis bien en français, mais si réfléchit ce qu'on a discuté en personne?
Merci beaucoup, Pierre. Tout d'abord, ma relation avec la caméra, c'est pas ma première fois de passer devant la caméra, car j'ai l'habitude d'animer des conférences et des conférences débats à la télé, à la radio, et même avec nos frères chrétiens ici au Mali, dans le centre Foi et Rencontre à Bamako, chose que la plupart de nos sœurs prédicatrices n'acceptent pas. J'anime aussi des ateliers, mais pour moi, cette vidéo était une occasion importante. Pourquoi? Parce que ça va informer et enseigner tous les fidèles à travers le monde des vertus de la religion musulmane pour le bien-être de l'humanité, car pour moi, seule la religion nous invite à faire du bien. Seule la religion nous invite à aimer son prochain et être utile dans la société. Maintenant,
Madame Cissé, je peux traduire cette première partie?
Okay.
Merci. So, Madame Cissé explained that she had a prior relationship with cameras than the videos that Nicolás produced, because she is used to animating, participating, organizing conferences and debates, either for radio and television, and that she sometimes also does so with Christian brothers and sisters and religious leaders in a center in Bamako that is a center for faith and encounters. And she saw the video that Nicolás produced as an important opportunity for transmitting the virtues and the values of Islam, and those values are for the global well-being. And she believes that the video was also a way of showing that religion is one of the only ways that it truly invites to doing good and to being useful for society. And I want to apologize if you can hear construction noises behind me.
Maintenant, concernant la deuxième partie de votre question, si la manière dont cette vidéo a été élaborée, moi, je crois que ça a été très bien élaboré. Ça a été très bien élaboré, on a beaucoup discuté, on a beaucoup échangé sur plusieurs points. On ne peut pas tout dire d'une personne ou bien des activités ou bien de l'impact qu'une personne peut mettre dans la vie, mais on essaye toujours de mettre les accents sur l'essentiel. Et je crois que Nicolás il est professionnel. Il est professionnel dans son travail. J'ai rencontré beaucoup de caméramans, mais j'avoue qu'avec Nicolás, il a une manière parfois d'aborder les questions, ainsi que Pierre, une manière de prendre les pauses, les pauses avec son caméra. Et en tout cas, pour moi, c'était une occasion très, très importante afin que je puisse lancer un appel à tous les leaders religieux de façon générale. Parce que cette vidéo-là, ça sera vu, ça sera écouté à travers le monde. Ça va sillonner le monde. Maintenant, c'était une occasion pour moi de lancer un appel à tous leaders religieux et religieuses d'avoir le courage de transmettre avec loyauté, et je dis bien avec loyauté, le message d'Allah et les instructions de son messager, Mohammed, paix et salut soit sur lui, afin de gagner l'agrément d'Allah. Car pour moi, la religion construit l'humanité et nous garantit la récompense que Dieu nous a promis dans ce bas monde et dans l'au-delà. Donc, c'était une très bonne occasion pour moi de m'exprimer, car une société est formée des hommes et des femmes. Les hommes, ils ont un très grand rôle à jouer, mais les femmes aussi, et plus particulièrement les femmes prédicatrices, les femmes prêcheuses, les leaders religieuses, elles ont aussi un rôle très, très, très important à tracer dans la société. Car à travers les femmes, l'impact est plus grand. L'impact est plus grand parce que la femme, et en tant que prêcheuse, elle communique avec les femmes qui sont qui? Qui sont les mamans de ces hommes, qui sont les sœurs, les tantes, les filles, les épouses de ces hommes. Donc, leur impact est plus grand que l'impact des hommes dans la société. C'est comme ça que moi, je vois les choses. En tout cas, c'était une très bonne occasion pour moi de participer à l'atelier qui a été organisé ici à Bamako et de m'avoir choisi pour enregistrer cette vidéo avec moi. Je vous remercie.
So I hope I grasped everything. First, on whether the final result of the video was reflective of the meetings and conversation that Madame Cissé had with Nicolás and Pierre. She said that the video was really well done, that there was a lot of exchange and discussions during the field research in Mali. Obviously, the video cannot say or show everything about Madame Cissé personality and work, but no video can summarize who a person is or what a person does. But she really feels that the video focused on her essential features of her personality and work. Madame Cissé has previously worked with many videographers, but she highlighted Nicolás' professional way of working, and she explained that he had a very personal and unique way of not only tackling certain issues, but also positioning his cameras when they were meeting in rooms or selecting specific shots. So a lot of praise for Nicolás's work. She also explained that she really saw the participation in the video and in the whole documentary process as an opportunity. First, because it was a video that was aimed to be seen and heard globally, but by other people in other places and regions, including other religious leaders. And she saw this as an opportunity to give a call to religious leaders generally, so that they would feel the urge to transmit Allah's message in a loyal way, or in a faithful way. And she really insisted on the word loyal, to transmit, not only Allah's messages, but also the instructions by Muhammad the Prophet. And she really also emphasized that religious leaders are to be a guarantor of integrity, and that religion, as such, is a guarantor of integrity. And she finished by highlighting the role of women predicators specifically compared to male in society. And she believes that women predicators' role and impact is actually bigger than men's, because they communicate with members of the congregation, and those members of the congregations are actually women who are wives, mothers, sisters, aunts, or daughters of men, and that therefore those women have access basically to a bigger portion of society. And she ended by saying that she was grateful for the opportunity to participate in the video, but also in the workshop that was held in Bamako with Geneva Call and Diaconess Humanitarian Law Center.
Thanks a lot. I think before I conclude, I wanted to sort of add a personal reflection, I suppose, on the role of the researcher. I guess that Nico wanted to add something, about the production, I guess, no?
Yeah, thank you. Just a very small comment. Merci beaucoup, Madame Cissé, pour les quelques vous avez dit. Merci bien, vraiment. No, what I would like to say that is this video was not only produced by me. Of course, I edited and filmed the video, but it was a collective work. It was you, Pierre, also. It was Joanna and Ezekiel. And I'm saying this because really one of the key things that we produce with this is a collective reflection. So I wanted to highlight this because it's not like an individual work, it's a collective work. And I think it's one of the keys when you do research work. It's only that. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Nico. No, I guess that from my side, I just wanted to add a bit of a reflection, I suppose, on the role of researchers. No, I'm going to say this a bit in English and French, so that Madame Cissé, je voulais ajouter une petite réflexion sur les rôles du chercheur, non, pour conclure, non, parce que et je vais le dire un peu en anglais, un peu en français, donc on peut tout comprendre ça. The point, I suppose, is we as academic, and I certainly, as you can see, we really like to talk a lot. We really like to say things. And I guess that one of the key teachings, I guess, that I get whenever I go to, and do fieldwork, and especially in such a in this project, is the value of listening and active listening in some way, to basically be able to understand when to stop, interpreting everything and sort of reading everything in light of your own lenses. It's a bit what I was saying before, the bias that we carry with us, And I suppose that, especially when we're talking about issues that are so context dependent and so localized in some way, I guess that the researcher, that the academic has to, shut up, learn to shut up and listen, I suppose, what the research participants have to say, and be able also to recognize that even when we do shut up, we do have our our own biases, and we need to be able to untangle those, to sort of separate those from the, the story that we are listening. Je vais le traduire en français, je vais faire une petite, comment on dit, summary, je ne sais pas comment dire en français, summary.
Un résumé.
Un résumé, merci. Un petit résumé de ce que je dis. Je dis que comme chercheur, comme personne qui travaille dans l'université, on a la tendance à parler beaucoup. Et on veut écrire, on veut exprimer beaucoup d'opinions, mais je pense que l'enseignement que je pris de ce travail du camp, et plus en général, toutes les fois que je fais du travail avec des personnes qui sont dans le terrain, c'est que je dois comment on dit, comprendre que je dois fermer ma bouche. Je ne sais pas comment dire. Je dois écouter plus. Non, on doit écouter plus. On doit être capable de n'être pas les protagonistes. Les protagonistes, ils sont les personnes qui sont dans le terrain. Et ça, c'est une responsabilité qu'on a comme chercheur. Et une responsabilité pour l'histoire et pour les sujets de la recherche. Donc, ça, c'est ma réflexion de la fin. Mais je voulais vous remercier. I wanted to thank Madame Cissé, Emily, for translating, and Nicolás, of course. I mean, we've got 5 minutes more. I don't know whether any of the people present have questions for the participants. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But presumably not everything, not all interviews were filmed. So how do you decide which ones to film and how particularly because presumably you don't quite know what's going to happen unless you do the whole thing again after you've already got an interview in the sense of what's happened before. And the second thing is, I think it's really interesting what you say about the voice of the participants and kind of shutting up your own voice. But then at the same time, as academics, we are expected to produce research output, which is kind of academic reflection, which is theoretically kind of engaged. So how do you then kind of move from sort of what people themselves are saying in their own kind of reflections on their situation to kind of this academic theorizing, that translation between those two, without kind of doing injustice to the testimony?
Yeah. Maybe I'm going to repeat that. I don't know whether you guys were managed to hear the full question, because I don't know whether the microphone is clear.
It's not that clear.
It's not that good, so it's better if I repeat it. Yeah, okay. So the first question was really how did we decide which interviews to film and which interviews not to film, given that we wouldn't know what the people would say in the interview. I suppose I want to ask this question. I want to turn this question to Nico, and then I'll ask the second one about the academic outputs. Nico, do you want to go ahead? And maybe, Emily, can you maybe translate this for Madame Cissé, please? Thanks.
I start or okay. Thanks for the question. No, honestly, I think at least the way I work is not choosing the interviews beforehand in a way, because of course we evaluate the person, the background of the person and why it should be interesting for their background to the project. But mainly, normally we try to make as much as interviews we can that we can do, because then we always have the ability or the option to not to use it. So we prefer to make as many interviews as possible. Yeah, I would say that, and then perhaps, for instance, at the beginning in Mali, we try to portray, like the different protagonists that we know that are in the place. Also, it happened in Colombia. So, for instance, having gender balance, but also having different persons related to the research subject. So not only religious leaders, of course, they are probably the main subject, but at the same time, it could be social leaders from civil society. It could be victims. It could be perpetrators. Yeah, I don't want, because I'm not a lawyer, I don't want to use a specific terminology and to make a mistake in here. But if you give me this freedom of speech in a way to use these words not in a technical way, we try to cover the different aspects to better understand how this works. I hope to have answered the question.
Donc, Madame Cissé, si je peux traduire pour vous, Nicolas parlait un peu du processus, on va dire, et la manière dont ils ont travaillé sur le terrain. Et il expliquait qu'ils ne choisissaient pas à l'avance quels entretiens allaient être tenus dans la vidéo à la fin, si je ne me trompe pas, Nicolas, que l'idée, enfin, qui partait du principe que les personnes avec lesquelles il y avait des entretiens avaient déjà été, enfin, on les avait déjà choisis à l'amont avec le projet sur la base de leurs activités, de leur personnalité, ce genre de choses, et que du coup, une fois sur le terrain au Mali et en Colombie, l'idée c'était de filmer le plus d'entretiens possible pour ensuite avoir une marge de manœuvre et un choix au moment d'éditer la vidéo. Donc d'être un peu aussi ouvert dans le nombre d'entretiens qui sont conduits sur place. Et puis il expliquait aussi qu'au Mali et en Colombie, l'idée a aussi été d'avoir des images d'autant de protagonistes, on peut dire, que possible sur place, afin de refléter au mieux la granularité du lieu et des circonstances. Donc on ne peut pas avoir des images que de leaders religieux, de prédicateurs ou de prédicatrices, mais aussi peut-être de personnes qui participent à des mouvements sociaux, de victimes, de perpétrateurs, mais dans un sens plutôt social et pas juridique. Donc voilà, que la vidéo reflète la granularité des circonstances sur le terrain.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, we'll take 5 more minutes, even if the time is up, but unless they come and kick us out, I think we can sort of take a few more minutes. So just to answer the question about like how to balance basically this, like the need to basically produce academic outcomes on the one hand, and then on the other hand being able to sort of shut up and respect this. So I think first of all, I suppose that we need to draw a difference between the kind of interviews that we were realizing. I think that for filmed interviews, and which have the this double purpose of both generating data and sort of provide visibility, that's where probably we need to be more aware of the need to sort of let the research participants speak. When we're talking about like research interviews, so interviews that are not necessarily filmed, interviews that basically have the sole purpose of generating data, then there can be a negotiation process, I guess, between the researcher and the interview participant. Emily, do you want to translate, and then I'll say a couple of things more? I don't know.
Maybe say a couple of things more, and then I'll translate.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. So that's in a way, I suppose, I manage this, and the negotiation process is really about, I guess, there's a part of the negotiation process that happens before the interview is realized, and it's basically sort of communicating clearly to the research participant what is the purpose of the project, and in what way can you contribute to this project, because also you don't want to waste the time of the interview of the research participant in some way. I know that's also a question of again, respect for the expertise and the time, of course, of the research participant. And then within the interview itself, of course, you kind of guide the conversation with these questions, or at least that's what I try to do. But again, like if the conversation goes another way, then I suppose that there's again like a responsibility towards the research participant to let them speak, and then you basically, it's in the sort of post fieldwork stage that you basically decide how you can use that. But you also, I think, and I personally think that I also have a responsibility to use that print material in some way. I need to, in some way, it's a form of accountability towards the research participant. I don't know whether this answers your question, but yeah, in a way, I see it as a negotiation process on the one hand, and then an accountability process of the researcher.
Donc, je ne suis pas tout à fait sûre d'avoir bien compris la première partie, mais Madame Cissé, c'était une question sur le rapport entre Pierre et les participants à la recherche, et puis comment se passait la gestion de la relation. Et Pierre décrivait la relation et aussi son attitude par rapport aux participants de recherche, à la fois comme un processus de négociation, mais aussi un grand sens de responsabilité. Et puis peut-être un processus de négociation, parce que c'est important d'être transparent et clair avec les participants et les participantes de la recherche avant les entretiens filmés sur en quoi vont consister les entretiens, peut-être quelles vont être les questions posées, quel est le but aussi du projet de recherche et comment est-ce que les participants et les participantes peuvent, on va dire, y contribuer avec leurs réponses. Et puis ensuite, une fois sur place, Pierre essayait de se montrer autant que possible, respectueux du temps et de l'expertise des participants de recherche aussi, parce qu'ils ont beaucoup d'expertise et c'est pour ça qu'on les a sollicités. Et puis, un des dilemmes auxquels il a fallu faire face, c'était d'une part comment guider peut-être les participants et les participantes pendant les entretiens avec des questions qui étaient suffisamment directrices, et puis en même temps leur laisser la liberté de pouvoir utiliser et démontrer leur expertise, et puis pas les rediriger parce qu'il faut avoir peut-être une certaine humilité aussi de la part de la personne qui pose les questions. Et puis ensuite, dans la phase post-recherche sur le terrain, il a fallu prendre des décisions sur finalement les réponses qui sont venues qu'on n'attendait peut-être pas, comment est-ce qu'on les utilise, on les intègre à la recherche, est-ce qu'on le fait, est-ce qu'on ne le fait pas, et puis finalement le faire ou essayer autant que possible de le faire, c'est assumer une forme de responsabilité vis-à-vis des participants au projet de recherche, pour une responsabilité dont Pierre avait parlé avant vis-à-vis du respect du temps et des compétences, et j'espère que ça capture un peu ce que Pierre a essayé de dire.
Ouais, merci beaucoup. Je ne sais pas si peut-être que cette question, on peut la tourner un petit peu pour Madame Cissé. Ça veut dire, si vous pensez, Madame Cissé, qu'est-ce que vous en pensez? Quelle est l'expectative, si vous voulez, que les projets et l'investigation génèrent dans les participants? Donc, par exemple, pour vous, quelle est l'expectative que vous avez de ces projets, de quelque manière?
Pierre, je n'ai pas très bien compris la question.
La question, Madame, si j'ose,
oui.
c'est, on a parlé un peu de quelle était la relation entre Pierre en tant que chercheur et les participants, et comment il avait essayé de gérer les attentes. Mais du coup, si on retourne, la question, c'est vous, quelles étaient vos attentes en tant que participante par rapport au projet de recherche, au fait de participer?
Au fait, je vois que c'était très, très important, car c'est à travers l'atelier qui a été organisé ici au Mali en faveur des leaders religieux, qui était sous le thème de l'influence des leaders religieux sur les acteurs armés dans le cadre du respect des normes humanitaires au Mali. Si je me rappelle bien, c'était le 28 et le 29 juillet en 2021. Cet atelier était très, très important. On a été ciblé comme conférencier ou bien comme panéliste. J'étais choisie parmi les leaders religieux. Vraiment, c'était un thème qui est très, très important et qu'on a abordé. La question était un peu délicate, car nous savons, nous, en tant que religieux musulmans, nous savons très bien qu'il y a des normes humanitaires qu'on doit respecter. Mais malheureusement, ces normes humanitaires internationales et ces normes humanitaires que notre religion nous dicte, nous, en tant que la plupart des religieux, des leaders religieux, ne le savent pas. Et c'était une occasion de demander à ceux qui ont organisé cet atelier, vraiment, ils ont mis leur doigt sur un sujet très, très délicat, très important, que nous, on n'a pas fait beaucoup attention. Nous, on est en train de prêcher jour et nuit sur beaucoup de thèmes, mais ce thème très délicat, on n'a pas l'habitude de l'aborder franchement. Et bon, c'était l'occasion de songer et d'aborder certaines questions. Et je trouve qu'à travers, après cet atelier, vous pouvez traduire, après je continue.
Merci, Madame Cissé. So Madame Cissé started talking about the impact and I guess the expectations, or how some of her expectations were fulfilled by the workshop that was organized in Bamako in July of 2021. And the workshop's theme was religious leaders' influence on the respect of or compliance with humanitarian norms in Mali. And she was chosen as one of 10 religious leaders to attend the workshop. And she explained that the workshop really pointed out or unearthed an issue that a lot of religious leaders were unaware of. And that obviously Muslim religious leaders are aware that there are some injunctions to respect certain humanitarian principles in Islam itself, but that they were not necessarily aware that there were the same injunctions or similar ones in international norms and standards. And that really it was, I mean, if not an eye-opener, but at least a genuine opportunity for reflecting on the role of religious leaders, and that it was also a welcome opportunity for herself as a religious leader, and that it's an important issue and one that really the religious leaders did not necessarily thought of before.
Pour cela, ce genre de recherche qui a été mené par Pierre, filmé par Nicolás, avec les autres personnes qui sont là-bas chez vous à l'université, si je ne me trompe pas, c'était Generating Respect, toutes les personnes qui sont là-bas, vraiment, c'était une très, très bonne initiative. Car vous êtes en train de mettre l'accent sur des sujets très, très importants, très délicats, et vous avez permis les leaders religieux du Mali de mener des réflexions, et à l'interne ici, entre nous ici, on a vu que vraiment il y a certains sujets qu'on devrait l'aborder. On a pris la décision d'approfondir la réflexion et de mener des messages, des messages ou bien des prêches, des séances de prêche sur ce même thème. Donc, de façon très brève, ce genre de recherche est très bénéfique pour celui qui est en train de mener ces recherches, est très bénéfique pour les personnes concernées, car de façon très brève, ni les conflits, ni la guerre n'a jamais résolu un problème. Même de la manière le plus simple, un conflit ou bien un malentendu entre deux frères ou bien dans un foyer ou bien entre États, dans un État, ça ne va jamais résoudre le problème. Donc, cherchons maintenant d'autres alternatives qui sont, comment dirais-je, qui sont la discussion, l'échange, les dialogues. C'est ça qui peut nous amener à avoir une solution, c'est ça qui peut nous amener à un terrain d'entente. Et c'est vraiment, ce genre de recherche, moi, je le félicite, je l'encourage et je ne peux que vous remercier de façon générale. Merci.
So, sorry, I'm just rereading my notes. Yeah, so Madame Cissé explained that really the research undertaken by the Generating Respect project is a very good initiative because it focuses on an important and delicate is a word that she used several times, topic, that is role of religious leaders on compliance with humanitarian norms, and that the workshop and the research itself has really been a trigger for internal processes and thinking processes within the religious community and the College of Religious Leaders that she belongs to, and that the group has decided to actively preach on those issues and to also issue, I guess, written preaches. So the project is obviously not only in her standpoint, it's obviously not only beneficial for, the researchers, but also for the research participants, because it was a trigger. And she highlighted that conflict and wars have never resolved any issue, and that the only way of actually resolving issues is through exchange, dialogue, and discussions in order to reach agreement, and that she believes that the project also triggered a process that is more inclusive and towards exchange on those issues.
Thanks. And I think there was a question from, no, that's fine. Okay. Good. So I just wanted to, thank you for attending this event. Also, special thanks to Madame Cissé, to Nicolás, and to Emily for making this possible. And yeah, I hope you've enjoyed that. It's been interesting it's definitely been very interesting for me to sort of reflect on these issues. So thanks a lot, and have a lovely day.
Thanks to you, Pierre, and to everybody. Have a nice day. Merci, Madame Cissé.
Merci.
Merci, Madame Cissé. Goodbye, everyone.
Merci beaucoup. Merci à tout le monde. Merci et bonne journée.
Bonne journée.
Au revoir.